Hello everyone, welcome back to the Dodgy Git Show. We're at Dodgy Git Show 113. We're going to cover Boris again this morning if we can. Yeah, fucking news makes me laugh, man. Fuck, go round and round and round and round and round. Yeah, thanks for joining me if you come along to join me this morning. UK time, 7 minutes to 10. 7 minutes till Boris gets his second day of rogering. Yeah, I bet he feel fucking shit last night, didn't he? He get home, have a drink. What do you reckon? Yeah? Walked in, poured himself a fucking large glass. Fucking just necked the lot. Slumped himself in a chair and went, for fuck's sake. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Welcome back to the Dodgy Git Show 113. Well, controversial topics, fucking a many, yeah. Well, we got 6 minutes or so to go. Let's have a look at I'll keep my screen refreshed. So they should do a countdown, really, shouldn't they? Should do a countdown because I'm on the Covid site, and what I'm gonna do is I'll shove myself in the corner when it comes up, as we did yesterday. Don't know if you saw any of made 4 videos yesterday, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's why I've named today, obviously, as I have. It's just getting coverage of it. Yeah, all these news sites don't allow you to comment. Yeah, have I got my chat box up? Chat box up. Okay, I'll open the live chat. Yeah. There you go. Live chat should be open. Can I pop this chat box down the bottom? I hope you're well wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I hope all your loved ones are well. I hope you enjoyed your breakfast or you're enjoying your supper. Yeah, if you're sat on the bog, yeah, just get on with it, yeah. Yeah, thanks for joining me. Your comment box is there available to say what you want. Rather you didn't attack me, but you know, when it comes up, you can put your freaking comments there in the box, because the news doesn't cover it. It disengages all the boxes, doesn't allow people to say what they think. Yeah, they got to go there and fucking scream at Boris for fucking 3/4 of a second as he comes out with his bobble hat on. Anyway, yeah, bit of a freaking cold day today. Yeah, blowy as anything, blustery, really heavily blustery, and the rains are coming in. It'll be raining about 2 o'clock, about 4 hours left. It'll be piddling down with rain for about another 4 hours. You see, that's what it does here in the UK. Yeah, the weather can be described as it clears up and then it rains, as one of my old friends used to say. Yeah, used to say a lot of things. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, it fits where it touches, doesn't it? Things like that. It's funny. Gordon was a funny man. Nice man. Taught me a lot, actually. That group of people down where I did that thing taught me freaking sharpen my teeth a bit. Oh shit. Never be bothered with doing it. The finest stuff I did was when I was younger, I think. Apply myself. Right. Let me just I'm gonna flick myself over here. Look, like this. Let's see. You see me? Hello. There you go. There you go. I'll stick myself. Let me have a little adjustments of me scales. Right. I don't like it. You know, I'm a bit of OCD. Yeah. Just get the gaps right. How's that? Does that look like it's professional? Yeah. Hello, Dom. How you doing? Good morning, afternoon, or evening to you, sir. How you? Yeah. Thanks for joining me. Yeah. Tell your friends. Yeah. Tell your friends. Get everybody join along. Like, subscribe. Check out my other videos. Why not? Yeah. What they're just talking about there on the telly before I turned it off because it's doing my fucking melanin again. They fucking acne prejudice. Fuck's sake. There's always a few in the school, isn't there? There's normally a boy in the class, the same as there's a fucking, same as it's the fucking Muppet Show again, isn't it? Yeah, there's always the fucking spotty kid. There's always the spotty kid. Fuck knows what the reason is behind people having one spotty kid and none of the other fucking kids are spotty. Yeah, don't know if it's to do with wanking or fucking eating too much chicken or fucking not having a bath or what? What is it? Genetic? If it is genetic, why is it genetic? You know, why is it passed on like that? To do with scent or smell, you know, or just the way you deal with protein and stuff in your body. That's why I said fucking wanking, you know what I mean? Adult show only, yeah. Although oh, that was fucking great last night. Hang on, let me just fucking refresh this thingy so I'm not behind with you all. Well, we had 1 minute to go, so it should be popping up. They're usually pretty quick, and they come on and just go blah 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 blah, and then start fucking talking. So I have to be quite quick with it. Right? No, last night was great. Yesterday, fucking debates that were on the telly. It was sign into porn sites with your face and a credit card, and then in the next breath, they were promoting an X-rated game. Yeah. And it was quite interesting to have the debate over the dinner table about how they're both categorized as the same thing. It's X-rated material that's inappropriate for children, and if the sign-in should be for pornography, then the sign-in should be for gaming as well. And if it's facial recognition, if there's a child in front of the screen next to his brother or sister, yeah, or his mum and dad playing the game will just not allow it to do. Or, and this was the evolution, AI intelligent gaming, where you do sign in as yourself and the game adapts itself to whoever the user is, user content controlled. So yes, you could play Vice City, but it wouldn't be called Vice City if you were under 18. It would be called something fluffy and like cloud-like, maybe like I don't know, Fun City or Educational Town or fucking I don't know, school maybe, yeah. And the missions could be age appropriate. So the missions could be, if I don't know, you're doing GCSEs, the missions would be to do with your GCSEs, and you could go to schoolhouse and get the teacher to give you the next mission, and you'd go out into the town and you'd explore the town in a safe environment from the comfort of your own home. Where if you were a crazed lunatic that wanted to go around and shoot people and do nasty things to women, that could be appropriated into an adult contented game, yeah, and mission appropriate again, yeah. Save the prostitute, you know, shoot the fucking mafia boss, all that fucking sort of thing, yeah. So how, if we embrace it and do it properly, we can actually adapt it so it does fit children, but in an educational manner, yeah. You can actually make it function in a way that's beneficial. Let me refresh this again there over time. We're up to date. We're on the right date. We're on the right time. 10 till 4:30 today, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah? Yeah, fucking acne prejudice and forced transgenderism in schools and shit like that. It's fucked up, isn't it? And then you've obviously got the migrant fucking hoo-ha this morning. Fucking Nora. Fucking hell, the migrant thing this morning. What'd you say about that? What'd you say about the obviously other thing going on down the other end of the swimming pool? Not good, is it? Where are these people? Right, hang on, let me shunt myself out of the way a sec. Something late? Are they late? Do we have a security issue going on in there, or is my computer slow, or is something going on? Just refreshing the totally refreshing the page. Yeah, well, let me know where you are in the chat. Where if you're might be in Kuala Lumpur or Australia or Bognor Regis. Yeah, might be in Swaziland. Yeah, or fucking somewhere in Malaysia. Yeah, might be in America. Might be in Mexico. Huh? Mexico. Bottom of Argentina. Hello. Yeah, we've had that fucking island for 250 years. I don't get it. Right, my computer is playing silly buggers. I think they might have a server problem. Still live and direct, yep. Live and direct here from the UK on Dodgy Git. It's Dodgy Git Show 113, trying to cover Boris. Oh, we've got a screen up. Come on, Boris. There's probably so many people trying to cheat. I've got the whirly wandy thing. Might burst into life in a minute, so excuse me if it does. Might have a technical itch here. Yeah, see, chat is disabled for this live stream. 3,500 people are watching.
May we start, please, on the topic of the reduction in the distancing rule from 2 metres to 1 metre?
Yes.
You'll recall that in the summer of 2020,
everybody.
on the 23rd of June, in fact, you announced the adoption of the 1 metre plus rule. It is obvious from the material that, and you refer to this in a cabinet meeting, meeting in the cabinet office on the 2nd of June, that the underlying scientific advice was that staying 2 metres away from other people remained the best way of reducing coronavirus transmission. But it is equally apparent that there was clear economic pressure upon you to reduce the 2 metre rule in order to make business viable. Was the 2 metre, 1 metre rule issue a particularly acute example of that balance between public health, epidemiological considerations and economic?
In a way, it certainly was. But I think I would it wasn't quite as simple as that, because the 2 metre, your observation that the scientists were recommending 2 metres is, of course, correct, or many scientists were recommending 2 2 meters. Some were not. Some were saying 1 meter was all right. But
3 feet.
It was also true
3.5
that
feet, 6
3
feet, 4
meters would
feet.
be
No, 8 feet.
better. 4 meters,
No,
5 meters would have been
5 meters.
epidemiologically
How about we get
more
a pole and a
effective than 2
lawnmower and a
meters.
piece of string? Do it
It
like
was a
that.
question of where to draw the line. And there was plenty of evidence from around the world.
For what?
that,
4 feet, 2, 3, 8 feet, pair of goggles.
Other countries had gone
Flip-flops?
from
No, fucking hell.
down to 1 meter. There were
Don't do
other
metric, mate,
international
sorry.
comparators that had done it safely.
What do you need there?
And
What
so
do we
although
there?
you're quite
What the
correct
heck?
that hospitality and other sectors were desperate to be able to operate because it was very, very difficult under the 2 meter rule.
Oh, it's different. 2
It
meters
did
now.
not seem to me, on balance, to be epidemiologically unsound to do it. And I of course, had to balance the
Welcome to the Dodgy Git Show.
very considerable hardship that was being caused to people by the effective closure of hospitality as a result of the 2 meter rule.
I posed the question the way that I did because I've actually quoted your own words from the summing up of that Cabinet Office meeting on the 2nd of June. Summing up, the Prime Minister said the underlying scientific advice, so obviously the combination of the various views that you'd received, was that staying 2 meters away from other people remained the best way of reducing coronavirus transmission. There was no doubt about
3 meters would have been even better.
Indeed, but there was no doubt at all.
3 meters would have been better. Why?
Epidemiologically,
Can't open the door then. Why would you open the door? You can't open the door for anyone.
Was the best way to proceed
stupid,
epidemiologically. But you were under understandably intense economic pressure to try to take a different path in order to be able to alleviate the economic burden.
And there were plenty of other countries that had done the same.
Oh, they did it, so I did it
Took
too.
place, of course,
I
in
only did
advance
what
of
they
the
did.
Out to Help Out scheme,
Don't
which
stop
was
shit,
put
does
into
it?
place in August in those
No excuse.
mid-week days,
No
Tuesday,
excuse.
Wednesday, Thursday of the 4 weeks of August. In your statement, you make plain that you and the Chancellor thought that there was a sound policy rationale for the introduction of the scheme. Were the policy rationales, firstly, the obvious economic support for the hospitality sector, but secondly, to influence social behaviour by incentivising the public to engage more generally in indoors hospitality? That was the thinking.
The thinking was that the country had made a huge effort, that we'd got the R down below 1, that the disease was no longer spreading in the way that it had been, and that within the budget of risk, it was now possible to open up hospitality.
Did they have one of them red, orange, green
logically,
things?
if we were going to
Oh, and if we move into
take
from
advantage
the red
of
box
that, if we're going to
into
allow
the
people
amber
to take
box,
advantage
then
of,
we'll be
allow
better
the
than we
hospitality
were.
sector to take advantage of the
Goodness.
freedom that our collective efforts had won them, then it seemed to me to make sense to make sure that they actually had some customers. That was my thinking. And it seemed to me that if it was safe
Fucking
to
hell, Boris.
open hospitality, then it must be safe for people to go to hospitality.
Do you accept, as Professor Edmonds said in his evidence to this inquiry,
Just tries to follow
it's one
logic
thing
as
to take
much
your
as
foot
possible,
off the
really, doesn't
brake,
he?
which is, of course, what had been
Dunno.
done in terms of easing the
Let me know in the
restrictions
chat.
in June and July. But to put your foot on the accelerator is, by implication, quite different. He, in fact, used the word perverse, but I'm just going to suggest to you that it's a different thing to do.
Utmost respect for Professor Edmonds. All I would say is that at the time that the Eat Out to Help Out policy was being aired with me for the first time, it did not seem, it was not presented to me as an acceleration, simply something to make sense of the freedoms that we were already giving, and it was not. I must emphasise, it was not at the time presented to me as something that would add to the budget of risk.
But it wasn't being presented to you by the scientists, was it? It was being presented to you by the Treasury and the Chancellor of the Exchequer. The material makes quite plain that they were the ones who proposed the scheme. The paperwork makes that absolutely plain. And at the same time, your Chief Medical Officer, Professor Sir Chris Whitty, in particular at a COVID-S meeting on the 22nd of June, was saying that in general terms, the proposed easing of restrictions
McDonald's milkshake and
in relation to
Whitty.
indoor hospitality was at the top end of the risk boundary. So you knew that there was an element of risk in this. There had to be a degree of epidemiological gamble. That's logical and fair.
I don't think that I thought that scheme in itself was a particular gamble at the time, and it certainly wasn't presented to me as such. Nor am I confident that there is very substantial evidence that it did indeed add to the R. Though I defer to what your inquiry has discovered. But I can't see anything that conclusively shows that it made a big difference. At the time, it wasn't presented to me as something that would.
Could we have 232086 pages
with it?
1 and then 2? We'll stick with 1 for the moment. This is just to demonstrate, Mr. Johnson, that there was considerable debate between the Treasury and Number 10 in relation to a voucher scheme which became the Eat Out to Health Out scheme. This is an email from the Treasury dated the 22nd of May. It refers to at the bottom of the page, the Chancellor asking her to thank all the teams as a meeting with you went very well. You complimented him on doing a great job. And then if we just go over the page to the middle, we can see a reference to presenting a plan for July. And then right at the bottom of the screen, Chancellor clear that should not do options in box at the bottom of the page, e.g. IT cut, people save, not spend, PM very keen on vouchers idea. So there was a general debate going on, obviously and sensibly, for some time before August. And you expressed your optimism, as it's been described, that the scheme was a good idea.
Well, it's better than nothing.
The material
right?
does indeed
inaction.
seem to indicate that there wasn't a significant
yesterday.
increase in infection after the scheme, although there is in the material some suggestion it may have gone up to some degree in different parts of the country, as you might expect. But you knew that the Treasury and HMRC had not in fact sought scientific advice on the epidemiological consequences of the scheme. That must have been apparent to you.
Well, I say in my statement that I thought that Chris and Patrick must have known or did know.
I thought they did it. I thought they had covered it.
To help I said that because
I thought he closed the plan at the gate.
Secret.
Yeah,
thing. It was
somebody, anybody, nobody, and everybody.
And I'm fairly confident
no
that it was
one,
discussed
everyone, someone,
several times in meetings at which I believe they must have been present.
Anyone.
You know, I understand that they don't feel that they were properly consulted. And I remember being, but I don't quite understand how that can happen, to be honest. I remember being surprised later. I think it was in
to find
September,
the gate was left open
when Chris said,
"Yes, boys, you left the gate open."
Boris, and
between you,
I thought that's funny because I didn't remember any previous controversy about it.
Mr. Johnson, in June and July, you had a number of bilateral meetings with the Treasury and the Chancellor.
But you wouldn't have controversy about the fucking
there were no
the animals being out of the field if you didn't know the gate had been left
but
open.
It would have been normal.
As soon as you find the gates left open, you'd go and look for the animals, right?
To have gone through the COVID-19 task force, and it seemed to me odd that the scientists hadn't been made aware of it.
So you knew they hadn't been made aware of it. You knew that...
Sorry, I don't think I said that.
It's not what I understood.
It seemed to me odd that the scientists... Oh, I see, sorry. Do you mean now it appears?
So I thought it was...
I apologise. I thought you meant at the time.
So my surprise was in... I think it was something like September 16th or thereabouts. It was quite a long time.
So they tried to feed you with shit, and then you agree with it, and then spin you back on it and go, yeah, but you said that. Go, what? And then they say that you're lying in court.
Meaningfully, and I thought, well, that's funny, because I didn't remember this being something that had previously seemed to attract objection or controversy.
But please, may we be clear about this? No scientists have been present at any of the bilateral discussions about the voucher or what became the ETAD to help.
Well, certainly not as far as I can remember.
No. The paperwork, and you've obviously received a number of papers,
actor-based media.
Made no reference, did it, to this scheme being supported or proposed by...
What's it about?
The epidemiological experts.
Thanks for joining the chat.
It didn't say that, but on the other hand, I wouldn't necessarily have drawn the conclusion from that it had either been opposed or that it had not been discussed with them.
And in your statement, you do say in terms, the scheme was, quote, to use your words, properly discussed, including with Chris and Patrick. So
I did say that, and that was my belief, and I don't understand how that... I don't understand how something as well publicised as that could have been smuggled past the scientific advice. I don't see how that could have happened.
So that we're entirely clear about this, your statement appears to positively suggest that it was properly discussed, including with Chris and Patrick. You're the one who...
The whole thing's a theatre, Dom. That's what's funny.
With whom it was discussed included the CMO and included the CMO and the GCSA. But so now today, you're saying you're not sure whether it was discussed with them.
People sew together all the fucking Muppets, don't they?
The reason I said that in my statement is because it must have been discussed with them, and I'm perplexed as to how something...
He's a bit like Elmo, isn't he, Boris?
Got through.
He's like an adult Elmo. He's like Elmo that's like, fuck it off, fuck.
Of COVID-S and COVID, which it was
Elmo after he's gone through
you understand that you make a positive avowal. It was properly discussed. That word properly is your word, Mr. Johnson. Not
fucking hell, Elmo.
Well, that's indeed my memory, and I remember the scheme coming up several times.
Fucking big bird.
And that's why I was, as I told you, I was surprised when later...
Oh, I didn't know someone left the gate open. I was surprised that the gate was left open. Oh, right. No shit.
And taken aback.
Enforcement. There was at the same time, of course, a constant debate as to whether or not, in order to promote proper self-isolation,
couldn't enforce his own fucking position in the dinner queue.
The guidance and the regulations.
So, all right, Boris, how you doing? Yeah, you sort of walk past him and stand in front of him. Yeah, just keep talking to him and get your dinner and walk through, and he's still stood there with a plate going,
should be provided.
I have found
that had to be had. Did you have a position in relation to whether or not the cure for lack of compliance or for difficulties with self-isolation should be greater enforcement, tougher enforcement and bigger fines, or for the setting up of a more generous system for financial support for those who were self-isolating? Do you recall?
Fuck's sake, my ex was fucking...
We did both.
Back in the frozen peas, man, as they get delivered. It's like, what are you doing?
A compensation scheme for self-isolation.
No, go. $100 on everything.
From September, I think of about £500.
Chill, love.
But I also took the view that if we were going to have a system of enforcement, then it needed to be pretty firm.
Do you recall whether or not the amount for the payment went up between March 2020 and September? Was there any increase before September? Mr. Johnson? Do you recall?
Well, I remember the top whack fine was £10,000.
Well, indeed.
Wake me up before September.
You declared in a handwritten
go
message,
gather the
a handwritten
fines
note on
raise some cash.
a box note given to you on the 13th of August. I agree with the openings, but the overriding message you said in capital letters should be about tougher enforcement and bigger fines. But at the same time, it's notable that you in no way suggested that an alternative way, or perhaps a complementary way, might be to increase the amount of payments for self-isolation.
No, we did, as I've just said, increase payments for self-isolation.
That wasn't a suggestion that you made at this time, although it came in later, as you rightly say, in September.
You're going to pay people
so
more to do
was,
less.
It would appear.
That's fucking funny.
Enforcement is the only way to go.
Well, that's obviously not quite right, because we did give quite generous payments for self-isolation. I think the concern that we had was that
I got 80% of my wage for a certain amount of time.
Any system of
and that was bullshit as well, because I should have
already spending, as everybody knows,
I should have paid myself
very considerable sums in
my
support of
wage, and I
so
should have been billing them 100%
some of the implications of the compensation system, but
they
because it was so important to go with self-isolation, to encourage people and to help people who needed support,
I was defrauded, mate,
for
on
the £500 payment.
On the regulations and the guidance themselves, evidence has been received by the inquiry from the former Home Secretary, Dame Priti Patel, that, in her opinion, there was a high degree of confusion surrounding the broad thrust of the regulations as well as their detail, and the inquiry has seen a diary entry in Sir Patrick Vallance's evening notes where you exclaim in frustration, but plainly perhaps not to be taken too seriously, who made these stupid rules.
Yeah, look,
was that against that context, Mr. Johnson? To what extent did your advisors and officials come to you over the summer and the autumn of 2020 and say there really is a distinct problem about the efficacy and the workability of these regulations? They're very difficult to understand, and they're giving rise to a significant degree of confusion. Did that debate ever take place?
We did try to make the rules as simple as we could, but the problem was the effort did to get people to self-isolate, to avoid contact because of the complexities of human life, became extremely complicated. And I think we really need, for the future, to think about how we do it again. Because yes, it was very difficult to enforce. And I do have a great deal of sympathy for
think about how we do it again.
Those who are charged with enforcing
That's
it, because
a worry.
It changed very often. I think there was 60
think about how we do it again.
changes, and the complexities for the public to understand were very great.
Have you thought about how it might be done differently next time in terms of the promulgation of the legal superstructure?
When will that be?
Well, I think.
When's that coming in? Is that coming soon or afterwards?
And the inquiry, but I
totally
think
scripted.
that there needs to be a great deal of reflection about the simplifying the whole approach and seeing what we can do to rely more on common sense and less on regulation and legislation. But there may be limits to that. And I'm not suggesting there is an easy answer, because
yeah, there's limits to that when people have to fucking deal with what life's dealt them, rather than everybody fucking being held back because they need fucking one person to do fucking some extreme thing because they fancy doing it.
Obliged to obey the same set of rules.
You fancy doing that, mate, fucking fine, but you get left behind. The rest of the fucking people are fucking over there.
It must be noted that despite your declared libertarian tendencies, your own message to your advisors, as we see from that document, was bigger fines, more enforcement, a heavier hand.
So here's the picture. I was very concerned. I knew that we were basically in remission as we come out of the first lockdown. I knew
remission, eh?
The reason I go for things like Eat Out to Help Out is because I think it's within the budget of risk. But I know that we're going to face another wave, and I really want people, if we're going to avoid tougher measures, we need people to
Did you just hear
obey
that?
the existing strictures.
Go back at the end of this. Go back. See, this is why I made this.
And we'll look at a WhatsApp in a moment.
Others edit this shit out, right? And chuck it away and bring up another one and all this kind of shit.
Epidemiologically taken for granted in terms of the examination of this viral pandemic. Well, we'll have 48399, page 25. You say it's completely obvious we're about to be hit by a second wave.
Possible green screen. Nothing fucking surprises me.
It's about halfway down.
Nothing surprises
just
me.
Halfway down the page.
That's why I try not to put fucking silly things all over my thing, because I'm just dodgy.
8:10:48.
Giving it as it is. Yeah, trying to serve up
Folks
shit.
looking at Spain and France and remembering March, it
it
is completely obvious we're about to be hit by a second wave. And on page 32, a month later, the 31st of August, in the same WhatsApp group, you say, page 32, we've seen the wave coming for miles, so we should be ready. And thank you. It's obvious that the government is concerned in the summer of 2020.
Is that a telling off, or is that
the prospect of being hit by a second wave?
What would his body language be when he would be saying that statement if he was in the room? How would
the possibility of putting into place a formal system of segmentation?
Working at home.
The inquiry has heard evidence how in August and September the COVID task force considered whether or not it might be possible in advance of the impact of the second wave to consider a formal system of segmentation for the elderly. Do you recall that debate?
I don't know.
I certainly do, and I think that
just people
we were looking at all
probably all trying to tick boxes in a fucking to-do sheet.
There were a number of meetings with the COVID task force. You say in the minutes of a meeting of the strategy committee, COVID-S,
in your assignment list
in September.
That one there's training, that one there, and that one over there is training that girl there. They put the nice looking blonde girl at the back again there. Hide her away.
Do you know now, can you recall why
I bet
the
she's the
proposals
one
on segmentation were either impractical or
it's your name, Dom.
or not possible to be taken further?
And a lot of people, I kept having to explain this to people, and because intuitively it sounds like a very reasonable thing to do, to protect those who are going to be most vulnerable, principally the elderly and those with chronic conditions. The trouble is that when the R starts circulating above a certain rate, the velocity of transmission of the disease becomes so extreme that it just breaks the segregation that you've tried to impose. And that vulnerable population, a percentage of them, will inevitably get the disease. And as you know, a small percentage of a very large number is a very large number.
So if we look at 48399, which is the CSA CMO PM WhatsApp
popping off for a minute, won't be long, back in a tick. Thanks for joining me, Dom, and everybody else is out there.
You entered into a debate with Sir Chris Whitty and Sir Patrick Vallance about the merits of giving the elderly a choice. And you say, in effect, why not give the over 65s a choice? They can decide whether to enter into spontaneous self-preservation and keep themselves, or run the risk of hugging their grandchildren and engaging fully in society. And you put that position to Sir Chris Whitty, and he says in the middle of the page, starting at 7:22:49 p.m, I agree it's entirely reasonable at an individual level. And then
it's the second paragraph is the crucial
indeed. He says people can rationally make an informed choice whether they individually would take a small increased risk of dying by hugging their grandchildren or going clubbing, perhaps not the same people both hugging their grandchildren and going clubbing. But at a population level,
this is the
government is under an obligation to ensure that the epidemiological line is held so that the R rate doesn't then go back above 1. Was that the nub of the problem?
That's it. So Chris, in that second paragraph, is making the essential point that even if you've elected to be shielded, or even if the government is trying to shield this segment of the population, it's not going to work because the infectiousness is too great.
And do you think that is why perhaps the segmentation debate didn't lead to any practical proposals? It came up against the possibility of the epidemiological problem.
I couldn't see how it would fix our problem, but it was sometimes a job to explain that to colleagues. But you can see that we didn't pursue it.
Well, it appears to have been quite a job to explain it to you, because you wanted that choice to be given to individuals, and your CMO was saying, don't do that. And quite rightly, I was interrogating my advisors about points that had been made to me with a view to understanding the arguments and being able to explain them to the world, which is my job. So by September, in light of what you've agreed, which is that it was obvious that a second wave was coming, you say in your statement, we were going to have to do something. There was this debate about a circuit breaker, you recall. The sage advice to you, relayed by your CMO and your government chief scientific advisor, was to the effect that the more rapidly interventions are put into place and the more stringent they are, the faster the reduction in incidence and prevalence and the greater the reduction in COVID-related deaths. As a general proposition, do you accept that?
That was the advice that they gave then, though, of course, it had changed a bit from where we were in March. Though they were still making the point on the circuit breaker. If you look at that, I think that sage advice in September, they're still saying, if you do one, it may not be enough, and you may have to do another, which was, if you remember, Patrick's point back in March.
So if we look at 102265, page 2, this is a WhatsApp communication on the 17th of September, we can see that Mr. Cummings says we should consider a 2-week circuit breaker, keep schools open but close bars, restaurants, etc. We should consider doing this week. And then he says, sorry, I meant consider now, saying this early next week for a fortnight. You say, what's the difference between a circuit breaker and a national lockdown? And what if it doesn't work? Is that a nod to the point you've just made? The difficulty with a circuit breaker is, you don't know whether it will work. If it's short, you may run the even worse risk of having to do it again. Yes.
So as I think Patrick said again in one of the meetings, there's the yo-yo risk, and which Sage themselves point to, and I think Matt himself, even though Matt was generally very much on the health secretary, was very much on the precautionary side of the argument, was not actually in favour of a circuit breaker, and I think that was his evidence to you as well, for that reason.
Patrick Vallance at the bottom of the page says, yes, lesson is go fast, go a bit harder than you think you need, go a bit wider in geography. So the scientific or epidemiological advice, Mr. Johnson, was there may be risks, but in the general epidemiological context, in the public health context,
oh dear, what do you all think?
The advice is you've got to go the extra mile.
Think it's
and
scripted,
that therefore would mean a circuit breaker as opposed to local restrictions or
proactive feedback,
varying degrees of stringent restrictions being applied. but your position
or is that just a extreme?
Ultimately, I don't think that the epidemiological argument is made out. I want to take a different path, and of course, circuit breakers were not applied.
Yes,
is that the nub of it?
I want to try to just remind everybody of the context when we're coming out of the first lockdown, because what's happening is that the disease is very diversely spread, shall I say, over the country, and there are parts of the UK where barely present. Some places, sadly, Leicester, some parts of the northwest, where they barely came out of restrictions throughout 2020. And so the question would have been, do we continue with national measures the whole time, which would have been which is the logical tendency of some of the submissions I think that you've had. That would just write off 2020.
Slow down, please, Mr.
Forgive me. Or do you try what we tried, which is to respect and reflect the geography of the outbreak, and to say, well, we're not going to close hospitality in Devon and Cornwall because of whatever is happening in the West Midlands or elsewhere. And that, for a while, seemed to a lot of people to be a sensible way forward. And I think, I will probably come to this, but I'm trying to the defects in the tiering system. But that led to tiering, and I think it was worth a try because of the difficulties with the circuit breaker concept, which Patrick and Matt and others have alluded to. So that was my hesitation. It wasn't that I was against going into a national lockdown per se, or that I had set my mind absolutely against it. If you look at what I said to the cabinet in July the 21st, I said we've got to keep this as part of our
Chris Whitty, what a titty.
But I thought that a local approach was a sensible, or regional approach was a sensible way to go, and it was worth trying.
This was a matter of spread of infection and death.
Fling it out there as folks are doing it.
You thought not having a circuit breaker and then latterly having a tier system was worth a try. Was that the correct approach when dealing with matters of such momentous importance? The scientific advice...
Circuit break, you need to turn off the entire fucking switchboard, pal.
The advice is never phrased in terms of you, the Prime Minister, must impose a circuit breaker.
I thought you said circuit breaker, not the whole panel, you prick.
Expressed in terms of more rapid interventions are required. Go fast.
Do the whole panel, mate.
Do
it's fucking all gone dark.
So they gave you, by implication, the room
dark,
to make the decision yourself. But was that the right approach?
Where's the
you apply what you knew to be the lesson learned from March, which is go early, take a precautionary approach, and go the extra mile epidemiologically?
So there were some areas that had outbreaks of the disease that were in very tough measures, and it's not as though we didn't do anything nationally throughout on the contrary. So we ratcheted up the measures
by whoever suggested it, whenever they suggested it.
We intensify the pressure on the virus. So September the 9th, we go to the rule of 6. September the 22nd, we go back to working from home and a curfew. Forgive me. October the 14th, we move into the tiering system. Some places go straight into lockdown. And so on, and we intensify the tiering system, and we then go into the full lockdown at the end of the month. And I actually think that programme had a very good chance of working. If you look at where we were by November, the 22nd, the disease was starting to turn down. Incidence was turning down, and the thing that really threw us off was of course the Kent variant, the Alpha variant.
But you've now moved further, of course, into November and December. On the 17th of September, as this debate indicates quite plainly, your chief advisor was saying we should consider a 2-week circuit breaker. Your government chief scientific advisor was saying circuit breaker would be for 2 weeks. We can get the paper round tomorrow on that. You can even think about doing it regionally. Your Secretary of State for Health and Social Care was saying if we want to avoid a national lockdown, we need to act fast.
Oh,
We're going in the wrong direction.
Porn,
and
innit?
your scientific advisor again says go fast. You
Hit
didn't,
by
however,
FOMO.
accept the advice set out there, which was
FOMO,
go for the 2-week
Boris.
circuit breaker.
Well, we did go. We went immediately. So a few days later, we go for the working from home and for the curfew. The health
You go for a 10 p.m. curfew, do you not, Mr.
the-
Johnson, and advice on working from home?
and the health secretary himself was opposed to, and already by the 22nd of September, 10 million people in a country of 67 million are already in tier 3, effectively in lockdown measures.
Yeah, that's
So
because
it's
you
not as
came
though
out on the
nothing has
TV
happened,
and fucking told us all to
in
stay
that
indoors,
period.
right?
Nobody has suggested
My
that
missus
nothing
didn't
was
get
done.
out
There
for
was, of
fucking
course,
months.
the rule of 6. There was the curfew from 10 p.m.
Like,
there was
not
the
even to the
package of
shop.
measures, which you described
Yeah.
as the package A
Like the
measures
little shop.
of late
We
September.
We lived in a
but
village with
the
about
circuit
fucking
breaker
14
was
people
not
in
The
it.
done.
national circuit breaker, because I wanted to keep going with a regional approach. We had 10 million people in
Regional,
lockdown
fucking
on the 22nd of
mate. You need to
of
be more
September.
adaptable
It
than that.
was
you
not as though
lemon.
the country was not going through, or large parts of the country were not going through another lockdown.
But-
The issue was whether there was any support for a continued regional
The thing is, you're being fed
approach.
by fucking Chris,
And
right?
Actually,
Chris is
if
feeding
you
all the
look at
paper makers with fucking
October
bullshit, right? Or is
even
it
October the
bullshit?
20th.
Come on.
cabinet meeting,
What was he telling him?
you'll
When was
see
he
that
telling him in it?
the CMO
Why was he spinning it in the way
says
that it was?
that the country, and I think JVT also, Jonathan Van Tam also said this, the country is basically divided into 3 parts. Those where the disease is flat, those where it's increasing slowly, those where it's rising fast, and a
Some's
regional
going up,
approach
some's
is
going
therefore
down,
still
some's going left,
justified.
some's going right.
And
Oh, it's
those
all
were-
fucking chaos,
that is
isn't
what-
it, eh?
As far as I remember, Chris said in that meeting. And so
Chris again, see?
I'm not going to
Chris.
pretend that this was an easy
Chris.
decision, and
Boris is
it
taking
certainly
advice.
wasn't. And
Matt's
it was one
taking advice. The
I
other geezer
agonised
was
over.
taking. Who is that?
But
The
I
fucking.
thought that the
What was the other prick? that
a
got
regional
fucking,
approach-
He was in a blue suit, wasn't he?
could still save
Skinny
us,
chap.
could still help us.
He was always
You
taking
have said
advice.
twice that part of the
Yeah,
rationale
what
for
was
not
his
having
name?
a circuit breaker in September was that the
Who
you said
was
it was not as though
advising
the
him?
country
It was
was
Chris,
not going
wasn't it?
through, or large
All
parts
down
of the
to
country were
Chris.
not going through another lockdown.
Chris
already.
Whitty. Wonder where he comes from.
Is this the
Chris
position?
Whitty.
Obviously, from July,
Chris
there were
Whitty.
areas and local restrictions,
Chris
notably
Whitty
Manchester,
there.
Liverpool,
We'll
and
go back
parts
to
of the
Chris
northwest
Whitty,
of
doesn't it?
England.
Mr. Whitty, Chris.
There
Christopher
was the
Whitty seems to be
national
the problem, doesn't he, Mr.
rule of
Christopher
6.
Whitty?
There was then the package A measures of the 22nd of September, which was a 10 p.m. curfew and advice to work from home.
Yes.
But the majority of those regions, which, to use your words, were placed in lockdown, were not in fact placed in lockdown unless and until they went into tier 3 in the tier system, which wasn't introduced until the 14th of October.
Yes, but there were there were already restrictions around the country, which were very severe, and
They were
local.
not, with respect, comparable to lockdown, were they?
Well, there people faced restrictions around the country on the basis of where the disease was prevalent and where it was spreading. And
So the answer's no, Boris.
I thought that we'd learnt a lot in that period.
Oh, right.
We'd seen the horrors of the first wave and
Right.
the shock of what had happened. You're completely right about that. And it was appalling.
Right, yeah, he's right. Well, he fucking said
and we'd
it
seen the
didn't he?
suffering.
Right.
But we'd also seen the impact of the pandemic, of the measures that we'd taken. And our objective remained
boy,
the
was it
same, which was to
impacted.
protect the NHS and
Yeah,
save
it
lives.
was.
But
Jesus.
and our strategy was to use NPIs. But it seemed to me, given the disparity in the prevalence across the country, it seemed to me for that period that a local approach was worth pursuing. And in justice and fairness, a lot of people thought the same, because they thought the disease is not prevalent here. It is not circulating in my community. Why am I being locked down? And we had to address that issue as well.
But the other people who thought the same, Mr. Johnson, were not the Prime Minister with access to this epidemiological public health advice, which appeared to be pointing in that direction.
Some of it did, and some of it, as I have just said, continued to support a regional approach.
Is that why you called for the meeting on the 20th of September in Downing Street with Professor Gupta, Professor Hennigan, Anders Tegnell of Sweden, I think the state epidemiologist, and also Professors Edmund and McLean, because you wanted to have a greater diversity of scientific advice, and at least advice beyond the advice which you were receiving,
why did you feed in that
not
information
inclined to accept from your own Chief Medical Officer and governmental Chief Scientific Advisor?
I think, with great respect, it was the other way around. What I could say, this is towards the end of September, middle of September, and I can see that things are going to deteriorate. There's no question, and I can see the direction of travel. I still want to use tough local measures to try to achieve what we need to achieve, but I can see that, as I've told Cabinet, and as I think I've told the public as well, we're probably going to have to go back into national measures. And what I want to, and I know that when I do that, whenever it comes, there will be, of course, a lot of downsides. And people are going to complain and to object for all sorts of good reasons. I need to have the arguments. I need to understand what a lot of people talk about, the great Swedish success, and how they managed to do it without lockdown.
Do you think he was charged with information when he's desperately asking for loads? And Matt and Chris and freaking whoever that other geezer,
I need to know
that was
what the counter arguments are.
Mr. Johnson, your government and you personally had declared that you would be following.
Yeah, they all trickle in with just a bit of information.
Throughout the course of that year, you had been guided by, accordingly, the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies and by your CMO and GCSA.
Like a donkey following a carrot.
Why did you not continue to follow, to be guided by that advice in September 2020? Why did you deliberately allow yourself to depart from that stated position?
First of all, because the scientific advice was not clear. There was a push for a circuit breaker.
It started questioning Chris
by the health secretary, as he's testified to you, and he was normally in the amongst the toughest in wanting to impose lockdowns.
Right, yeah, see, it's telling, isn't it?
Efficacy.
Chris again.
Where a circuit breaker was tried, as you know,
Chris
in Wales, it's not clear that
looks so sly and intelligently clever that it'll never be questioned by anybody, right?
Sure, but
time the judge
what I'm saying is that there were perhaps legitimate grounds for thinking that a circuit breaker was not a panacea, and I was keen to.
Hope you're enjoying joining in, listening to this shit. It is quite fucking interesting.
Regional strategy, which continued to have scientific support for being reasonable, as I've said.
The nature of the specific intervention may not have been absolutely clear, because Sage posed the issue to you in terms of interventions being required.
When he says Sage, who's he referring to again?
You understood it to be
team, not an individual.
The merits of the circuit breaker. So there was a clarity about the debate.
Don't pass due diligence.
What lacked clarity
deal with them. The
what
audit
ultimately,
fails.
what political decision should be made by you. You were unclear as to what the way forward should be. the meeting on the 20th September...
That's not true, but for great respect. What we decided to do was to continue to tighten the measures that the national measures that we had, but also on October the 14th to go for the tiered system.
On the 20th of September, you deliberately arranged for a meeting at which you allowed yourself to hear from scientists on either side of a completely different debate, which was not to do with the merits of a circuit breaker, but to do with whether or not, as a general policy, the Great Barrington approach, that's to say, to use another word, another expression, the let it rip approach should be applied, or whether or not the general approach of caution should be applied. That was the debate on the 20th of September.
No, well, actually, I don't remember people discussing the Great Barrington Declaration, but
the approach which is later reflected.
Well, what was so interesting about the debate on the 20th of September, to which, as you can imagine, I listened with great care, was that actually the scientists who
Saturday 11 a.m. is getting frustrated.
To use your words, the let it rip.
And he rubbed his nostrils. You got a bogey or a fucking line's wearing off.
Did not really support that approach. And the longer the conversation went on, I was fascinated to see how actually they migrated towards a precautionary approach and towards the understanding that MPIs were inevitable and necessary, and that you had to do something. So the question. So I was really interested in. I was thinking ahead in that conversation. I was thinking ahead to where we were going to end up in a few weeks' time, and I wanted to fortify myself against the types of arguments that you've mentioned.
So bluntly, although you had been given to understand that Anders Tegnell, who was the state epidemiologist for Sweden, would probably recommend a more herd immunity...
Chef was a funny muppet, wasn't he?
...style approach, turned out, to your surprise in the meeting, to argue, in fact, for a stronger intervention.
He didn't... I wouldn't say that. No, not sorry, let me be clear. I don't remember him... or anybody making any particular comment about, tiers versus lockdowns or whatever. But what I do remember is a surprising degree
we had a very nice lunch
unanimity,
afterwards. Yes, we did.
Given the divergence in views that I've been led to expect.
Yes. He may not have mentioned, and there's nothing to suggest he mentioned circuit breakers or lockdowns or tiers, but in the general conceptual debate about the precautionary approach and the need for stronger intervention, Anders Tegnell made it absolutely plain to you that, contrary to much of the press reporting about the Swedish approach, a stronger intervention was merited if
basically. Yeah.
The approach to be adopted by your government was, there's a second wave coming, we need to do more to stop it. That was the approach he took in the meeting.
I couldn't swear to that, Mr. Keith. What I remember is that everybody, and
everybody, anybody, somebody or nobody
was. I mean, the meeting. It was more abstract. I think than
the game was
concerned with the details of the current UK position, about which actually I don't think they necessarily. Some of them knew.
I mean, you couldn't understand it.
Is that right? You read one-page papers from every single attendee about inviting them, and they produced information about the approach that the United Kingdom government should adopt.
What do you mean by that, Boris? How was it abstract? Was it describing a
situation that we were in? What I do remember is there was a much greater uniformity of view that we needed to do something. What I'm trying to say to you is that if you're saying to me that Anders Tegnell,
the bigger voice made me do it. His eyes were further apart than mine.
That wasn't.
I have not suggested that to you, Mr. Johnson.
But that's not what I remember anyway.
Yeah. fucking funny.
At a COVID-S meeting on the 21st of September, the following day, you said, and the minutes record that you said, the events of the spring showed the consequences of making decisions too late. So you were well aware of the need to get on and make decisions and to avoid the mistake of the spring, which is to leave the most stringent interventions to the last minute. Correct?
Well, the mistake of the spring, if you remember, was that we'd mistaken our place on the curve, and that was, but we were in much less doubt about that now.
The mistake in the spring was making a decision too late. The fact that one of the reasons for the decision, for that mistake, Mr. Johnson, may have been a misunderstanding as to where we were on the epidemiological trajectory is quite different, is it not?
No, we couldn't have made the decision earlier because the facts as we understood them were different.
Your summary in that meeting.
Oh, you're both.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're both
talking over each other.
Exactly, that may be part of the problem. But also, can we make sure we know which period we're talking about? Because we've been talking about the spring and the autumn. Just
in the autumn,
she's getting tired now.
You had said in a COVID-S meeting, the 21st of September, by reference back to the spring, the events of the spring showed the consequences of making decisions too late. Regardless of why those decisions were taken, Mr. Johnson, what were the consequences of making decisions too late? Your reference. Yeah. What did you mean?
Sorry. So, just to clarify this point, in the spring, we couldn't have made the decision any earlier because we didn't know the relevant facts. When it came to the curve in September, October, we were much more on top of it. We could see where it was going. And the relevant facts are that the virus was not evenly distributed across the country. And that was the key thing. It looked as though it might be in abeyance for a long time in parts of the country, and therefore it made little sense to lock it all down. And what we were trying to find, and you can criticize us for this, but I think it was reasonable. We were trying to find a way through that allowed as much of the country as possible to keep going.
Mr. Johnson, what were the consequences of making decisions too late? When you said those words to your colleagues on the COVID-S meeting on the 21st September, what did you have in mind by consequences and the decision-making having been too late?
Clearly, if you
deaths
make any decision too late, then there's going to be a cost, and in the case of COVID, there's a cost in human life.
There you go.
But what I wouldn't accept is that the decision in all the decisions in September, October, November were too late. Nor would I accept, knowing what we did then, that the decision in March was too late.
Well, there we are.
There we are.
On the 22nd of September, you announced the Package A measures. You recall that you were presented with a paper which had Package A measures, the majority of which were described in the very same paper as being unlikely to bring R below 1, some Package B measures, Package C measures, the more stringent, plus the possibility of a circuit breaker. And you went for all the Package A measures and some of the Package B. So largely, the measures which your own CMO had advised would be unlikely to work, even in combination, to bring R below 1. But that was your right. You announced that your government would not listen to those who say, let the virus rip, nor to those who urge a permanent lockdown when you announced those measures. But the phrase, let the virus rip,
language,
and the notion that you as a government would let the virus rip was your own phrase, was it not?
Matt Hancock goes...
No, I'm sad to say there were plenty of people who had used the the phrase in conversation with me. I was trying to represent a view which was sadly quite widespread, which was that, as you've said already, the approach might be to segment the most vulnerable and to protect them, and to allow the vast majority of the population who are much less vulnerable to gradually acquire immunity. Now, that was not, as we've discussed repeatedly, an approach that I could take at all. And I was saying that in order to explain to the public why it was not an approach that we were taking, any more than going into permanent lockdown was an approach that we could take. We faced an appalling... The problem with this whole period is that we had come out of... We'd found a way out of lockdown, and we'd got the R below 1, but we didn't yet have either good enough therapeutics or a vaccine. And so our only tools remained NPIs. And the question was, do you go straight back into lockdown, which is what a circuit breaker is? I mean, a circuit breaker sounds like a pretty it's a glib phrase. It actually means an immensely difficult, costly exercise, which falls hardest on the poorest and neediest in society. You then might have to do it again and again. And there's no guarantee that it's going to work. And you don't know what the end state is, because you've got no vaccine. And that was why I thought it was sensible to continue to throw everything we had at a combination of intensified national measures plus the regional system, the tiering system.
My question to you was whether or not you, whilst announcing that you would not listen to those who had said "let the virus rip," had used the words used the words yourself. You deny that. So, could you please look at the diaries?
Sorry, what I'm saying is that this was a phrase in common parlance at the time, and remains so.
Sir Patrick Valence's diary is 273901, page 92. Yes, actually having a discussion, a meeting with the PM about, quote, letting it rip.
5 minutes left on this
page.
part.
I don't wish to be
I'm just going to put
repetitive, but this is exactly what you'd expect me to be talking about at this stage.
Page 245.
This is June 2020.
I'm going to show you all the ones, Mr. Johnson, out of fairness. The Prime Minister meeting begins to argue for letting it rip, saying yes, there will be more casualties, but so be it, they've had a good innings. 608.
What do you reckon to what he said so far, eh? Do you reckon he's being honest as he can, or is he just mumbling around, or do you think
perhaps that's the same?
Said as it was, he's trying not to grasp people up? Who's influenced him though, eh? Who's shoving bits of paper under his face, and who's making them bits of paper for those people? Like Dom says here in the chat, yeah? Actor-based media.
We should let it rip a bit.
Paid.
150.
Yes. Yes. The cast illusion of spellings. Go fish. Card
He's
game.
obsessed with older people accepting their fate.
Books. Yeah. Go fish.
230.
Spearlings. Yeah. Spearlings. Spells.
Obsessed with the average age of death being 82,
from Hollywood timber.
which is longer, you believe, than the average life expectancy. Get COVID, live longer, you said. 245. Back to the other one.
Back to the other
You say at the bottom of the page,
Johnson, what you doing?
according to Sir Patrick Valence, we're in a really tough spot, a complete shambles. I really don't want to do another national lockdown.
don't want to.
You are told that if you want to go down this route of letting go, you need to tell people. You need to tell them you're going to allow people to die.
Who told him that? See, that's fear.
Was your position, Mr. Johnson, that in light of your views secretly held
FUD and FOMO around,
about
on
people
purpose,
dying having reached their time anyway, that you were obliged to reject the advice of your advisors that there be a circuit breaker?
No.
That there be no national lockdown until the last possible moment?
No.
And that you would try a tier system?
No. No. So the implication of the implication that you're trying to draw from those conversations is completely wrong. And my position was that we had to save human life at all ages.
I'll try.
And that was the objective of the strategy. And by the way, that is what we did.
Moreover,
if you look at what we actually did, never mind the accounts that you have culled from people's jottings from meetings that I've been in. If you look at what I actually said and what I actually did, and there is abundant quotation from me, millions of words that I've spoken in Parliament or in press conferences
change his mind 2 seconds later because something else came up.
We went into lockdown as soon as we could the first time round, and we sensibly went for a regional approach when the disease picked up again.
Right,
and then again went into lockdown on the 30th, 31st of October. And I think, frankly, it does not do justice to what we did, our thoughts, our feelings, my thoughts, my feelings.
Justice, Boris. To say that the rest of us, mate.
We were remotely reconciled to fatalities across the country, or that I believe that though it was acceptable to let it rip. What I was asking, and I had to do this. I had to, and we covered a lot of this yesterday, but I had to challenge the consensus in the meeting. You've got to understand that these meetings
don't have to. Look, fists bang on table, gorilla.
An overwhelming
bang.
number of very, very talented, brilliant public health officials, civil servants, and so on, and scientists. And I was representing the only layperson in the meeting. Well, apart from the occasion there would be other politicians, but I was basically I had to speak for everybody who wasn't in the meeting and who wanted these points put to the scientists before I went out to explain them. I had to get their version of why this wasn't the case. Why wasn't it true that as people were continuously saying in the media and elsewhere that it was the answer was to shield the elderly, protect the elderly, and to let it rip otherwise. I needed to have the counter arguments. And if you want to look at what I thought, why don't you look at what I actually said in cabinet and what I did?
It's going to be in the if Kia doesn't use that fucking statement, right?
Well, sorry, I don't want to answer your question.
It's obvious, Mr. Johnson, that you were not minded at all the time, to accept the scientific advice that you were being provided with, and that it was absolutely your right. It's notable that there was...
Notable, is it? Oh, right, just make a
analogously
note of it on a post-it note and stick it to the inside of my eye.
And the CMO and the GCSA, no economic advisory body, no economic analysis being provided to you in a formal structure that could have provided a foundation for the alternative side of this debate. That is to say, well, Prime Minister, you've got a great deal of evidence here, epidemiologically and in public health terms, but you've got a terrible decision to have to make again, whether or not to impose a lockdown. And that engages the debate with which we're all familiar and with which you are anxiously grappling, which is the damage on the economy.
Mr. Johnson, Mr. Keith, I thought Mr. Johnson said yesterday he did have that kind of analysis. It came from the Treasury.
I was going to say, thank you, my lady.
Yes, no, but my suggestion is a formal economic stage, a formal body, advisory group, rather than just the Chancellor and the HMT directly.
I've thought about that, and I think, and that's it's a suggestion that I hope I bet you're going to look at. But I think that actually, and I was going to say this at the end, I'll say it now. I think that the cabinet government, there's a reason it's evolved in this country in the way that it has, and I think that the Treasury representing the economy, the Department of Health representing health, actually worked pretty well after a while. I mean, I think it was a great shock adjusting to COVID, but I think that the way it worked was pretty good. Departments did what they needed to do.
These debates,
because they got a shitload of cash,
and there are hundreds of meetings at which the CMO and the GCSA attend, and where the epidemiological evidence is provided to you, takes place in the Cabinet Office room,
the
Cabinet room, or the Cabinet Office room, or your study.
It's not taking place in Cabinet. You don't want to say nothing else, look.
Mr. Cummings has described how the Cabinet process, the debate in Cabinet, was more politically excitable, more
performative.
Thank you, performative. How there were worries about leaks, where it was more a matter of political theatre, and therefore there wasn't the opportunity, for the reasons he explains, to have this sort of debate and to consider in detail the sort of advice about which
I think that's certainly a fair criticism of some cabinet meetings, but as time went on, and I genuinely think that cabinet proved to be more and more valuable, and you genuinely started to have different points of view properly represented around the table, and different departmental interests, particularly HMT,
working with each other had become a daily norm. They've got past that stranger danger thing.
I started to see the wisdom in the system, and I think it worked.
There's a wisdom in the system, but
further question,
that's being convinced. That's the blag has succeeded.
236-586 is the email from the Principal Private Secretary to the Chancellor in the Treasury.
Is that right? Is that what's happening?
Concerning one of your regular bilateral meetings with the
bullshit
Chancellor.
And kept in the dark.
You, as Prime Minister, plainly had a large number of bilateral meetings with him, Mr. Sunak, and there is a reference in the first paragraph of the email from the Principal Private Secretary to the following the inconclusive strategy meeting, so a strategy meeting, perhaps a wider strategy meeting in government, the Prime Minister and Chancellor met and discussed the plan for the NPI easements on Friday. So you and your Chancellor meet privately, and by privately I mean in the absence of cabinet, in the absence of other secretaries of state or civil servants outside Number 10 and HMT, and you discuss plan for NPI easements, so a public health issue. No other minister included shows the strength of the Chancellor's voice in these discussions. So, with reference back to my earlier question about a more formal, open, perhaps transparent process of enabling the Prime Minister to receive economic advice, do you think that these private bilaterals, where you discuss with the economic voice in government, the Chancellor, matters of public health, were the right way to have done this?
I can't remember the meeting that I think it's Elizabeth Perelman is referring to.
It's a normal bilateral.
These would be normal conversations that I would have with Rishi. You'd expect me to have them. The plan for NPI easements that she refers to is not something that we have devised at this meeting. It's something that we're discussing, and presumably we're discussing the funding implications or the economic implications of what's envisaged.
Well, there are references to SAGE, there are references to MPI. It's obviously a public health argument.
Yes,
debate.
Yes, it is. But what we're everything in that period related to public health, absolutely. And so we would have been talking about, I imagine, what the Chancellor's views were, and I would have been listening to what he had to say.
And finally, there is evidence, both from Mr. Sunak's own witness statement and also from Mr. Warner, Ben Warner, as well as actually Mr. Cummings, that the Treasury's analytical capabilities would have been assisted by a more formal system of cost-benefit calculation. And just pause there, please, Mr. Johnson, before answering. In your strategy update comments, we'll come to this in a moment, but in response to the final paper, or one of the final papers before the second national lockdown from the COVID task force, you wrote in your handwritten annotations at the end, in capital letters, "Can I please see some serious economic analysis?" Is there a case, by way of one of the many lessons to be learned,
do the fucking jobs, and they're just coming up with shit or arguing or saying, "Oh, we
so
ain't
that
got
the
it."
Treasury and the wider world can see how there can be a quantitative analysis of the impact of interventions economically?
Well, the Treasury does a phenomenal amount of cost-benefit analysis, as you can imagine, already.
Yeah, but
and
yes, I think the fucking wrong one, is there?
As I've said already, my lady, I think what
if they've done it already,
really
they'd have it
need
to hand, wouldn't they?
Is some proper quantified analysis of the benefits of NPIs and the epidemiological benefits of NPIs, because I think there's still too much uncertainty about those, as well as a proper understanding of the economic costs. So yes, I think if there could be some way of putting those two things together in a formalised way, that might very well be useful. But that was effectively what I was doing the whole time, week in, week out. Those were the calculations we were making. But I want to stress that the objective was always saving life, and that was what we were trying to do.
That's your final question before the break.
That's my final question before the break.
There we go.
11:30, please.
11:30, we're back, everybody. Yeah, thanks for joining me. I'm Dodgy Git. This is Dodgy Git Show 113. First part of day 2. Boris being questioned there in the COVID inquiry. What do you think about his answers? What do you think about the questions? Do you think they've been very delicately picked questions, or is there other stuff you'd ask him? You know, without losing your fucking rag and throwing shit at him. Yeah, what would you actually ask? That's a sensible question. Not one of these randomly fucking picked stopped in the street and asked fucking what do you think question type things. Proper fucking questions, yeah? Anyway, I'll see you in 10 minutes, yeah? They've obviously popped off to the loo and they'll have a ciggy, won't they? Eh? And then we'll probably come back and do till about almost 1, or they'll probably almost run till 1 o'clock. Yeah? And then she'll have a dinner for an hour. Yeah? And then she'll do 2 till 3:30, 3:15, yeah? And she'll do till 4 o'clock-ish. Something like that. That's how it normally works. Anyway, yeah, catch me in part 2 in just a moment. Yeah, click the subscribe bell. Yeah, and it'll ding when I come back. It won't be long. Thanks for joining me for part 1. I'll see you in part 2. Bye bye.